One, the big thing is when I was watching your interviews and I've looked into your work, I found a couple through lines that I was interested in asking you about. I have 6 right here. I have isolation, loneliness, desire, melancholy, love, and longing.
Okay.
How do you feel about that? For me, it's just looking at your interviews, a lot of the content you pick tends to be you tend to pick very slower, melancholic songs to play alongside, for example, your emphasis on Evangelion, the very kind of like melancholy of it all, and the almost the isolation of the characters is what your emphasis is on. I don't see a lot of I feel like you try to avoid as much the action and the what do you call it? Almost the eschatology of it all. It's more about the characters.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, that kind of ties into what I resonate in those works to begin with. I mean, I watch Evangelion not for the fight scenes, obviously, but for the characters and the kind of introspection and experimental stuff of it. But in terms of specifically isolation and stuff, I feel like there's a particular way of going about that I'm very particular about. There was this one video. Okay, so I did an End of Evangelion video using Everything in Its Right Place by Radiohead, and around that same time, I think probably before me, there was this editor named Dubstep King, who's an incredible editor that did the same mashup. It was Evangelion with Everything in Its Right Place, and I watched their video, and it deeply offended me, which I mean, and that's fair. It was much better edited than my video. They had effects that I couldn't figure out. I wouldn't know how to do that. They're much more technically advanced editor than me. But they used the way they cut the show was to hone in on Shinji's isolation, and in particular, have you seen Evangelion?
Yeah, I've seen it.
Yeah, so at the end there's the whole congratulations scene in the very last episode. That is supposed to be it's not ironic, I don't think. I think it genuinely is Shinji comes to a very specific revelation about his relation to other people, the death of other people and stuff, and grows as a person. I think it's good. But they perverted those shots and made it look like they were behind glass, and just held on these stills of each of the congratulation things as if to double down on Shinji's alienation and lack of feeling for other people. And to me that felt pessimistic, unproductive. That's not the type of person I am. I'm a pretty optimistic person, even though I deal with rather sad things. If you even, I don't know, one of my darkest videos I'd say is the Slint K-On! One, which is in a way perverting that show's imagery, which is a very upbeat show, a very kind of goofy slice of life show, and I took it and I took these shots out of context and made it sad, but I made it this kind of bittersweet thing. I think the last shot's very telling in that video. So I think loneliness is something people deal with. The way in the Abrogate Need show I talk about pain a lot and stuff, and even in my first Prostrate Constantly show last year at the Aviary, there's a lot of painful things, but I'm always trying to use that, like James Baldwin said, as a way to connect to other people rather than think that I'm the only person in pain. And I think that's the way that people grow, and so I'm just trying to be a better person. And I want my art to reflect that because I think that's healthy for people.
That's right. 100% I applaud that. I find myself on the other end where I say this to a lot of people, I realized that I got bullied a lot as a kid, and I realized that I think it can go in 2 directions for a lot of people. One, it can make you want to be a better person because you want to be better than the people who hurt you. But in the other situation where I kind of relate to, I think it drove me into this almost misanthropy around people, where I almost dejected people even though I wanted to be closer to them. And it created this paradox between us where I want to become closer, I want to become friends with you, but I don't trust you. I don't think you're a good person. Not because I don't think there's the possibility, but I just don't think that people in general can be good people. So I have this hard time kind of relating. So for me, it's obviously your work to me almost strikes a different vein with the people who are watching it. And I've read through your reviews, and there's a lot of optimism in your reviews. You don't talk about negativity. You don't try to bring that to your reviews. You try to applaud the creator as much as possible, and I think I respect that a lot.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that, and that's always what I try to do, and that's why even in my negative reviews I tried to make that duality of man list, which is where I'm taking a half star or 1 star and comparing it with a 5 star or whatever. A movie I think I did something wrong, and then taking an example of what did it right and just showing that there are ways to tackle these concepts that each movie's approaching and do it in a way that's constructive instead of destructive and alienating, which I think the worst art is. And in particular, like what you said about like, you know, people who hurt you, you want to try and like be better than them and stuff. I think to me, like the biggest revelation I've had with that I think a good analogy for this is John Cassavetes, when he went to Hollywood and did Two Late Blues and Child's Waiting. He got screwed over by Hollywood in so many ways, and like very deeply hurtful ways to him. Like Child is Waiting, this movie about mentally handicapped children and all that stuff. He really cared about this. He was really connected to these kids, and he wanted to make a message about them etching their own path, being able to exist, finding their own like spheres in a way that was individual to them. And he didn't think that throwing them in an institution, which I mean comes back in Women Under the Influence and stuff, is a very productive way of dealing with these challenges they're facing. And then Stanley Kramer comes in, recuts it, basically makes it a more pro-institutional message. And I could see that, like, that's not just recutting a movie, which hurts enough. That's like changing a fundamental message about people he really cares about and doing that. And so this is like, you know, deep hurt. And this is like deep pain. And yet, how does he begin Faces? He begins Faces with these executives in a screening room talking about a movie rather flippantly. And then he spends the whole movie exploring these people and about how these are people with love, with problems, with all these internal nuances and drives, and basically sells you on loving and feeling for these people that had just hurt him. And I think that's the most mature thing, is that realizing that the people who hurt you, they got their own shit, you know, like they're all fucked up in their own ways. And in our own, like there's this line in Bob Dylan's Things Have Changed where he says, I hurt easy, I just don't show it. You can hurt someone and not even know it. And it's like genius, because it's like he sees the way people have hurt him, and then he realizes that in his own ways he's probably hurt people he doesn't even realize, you know. And so I've done that. I know I've hurt people in the past that I didn't mean to. I thought I was trying to be friends with them and stuff, or I was like just like kind of like I thought I was being like kind of sarcastic and riffing with them, and I realized I actually said something that was really insensitive, you know. And so I think reconciling that, realizing how you can be more sensitive in that, is going to be really productive, and realizing that the people who hurt you aren't an enemy, they're just another person with fucked up shit that accidentally did something wrong, or purposely did something wrong because their own principles are fucked up or whatever.
Speaking of Women Under the Influence, that was one of your movies that was kind of on your letterbox. And beyond that, I kind of did a digging. I looked into your favorites. I watched your favorites for the sake of this. I watched Metropolis. I watched Toy Dory. I watched Funny Pages. I'd already seen what's called Jazz on a Summer's Night. I saw that at the Metro. Those feel almost in contrast to like what I would expect from you to be like these movies you love. Metropolis to me feels like almost, it has that Evangelion-esque ending where it has this very explosive ending, but then the character almost, for me, it feels redundant that he's happy to be in the wasteland, and he's happy to be like, you know what, he tells his uncle he wants to stay in the wasteland a little bit longer. How do you feel about that? That like, it's almost, to me, it's almost like a happier version of Evangelion. Do you see it kind of a similar way?
Maybe. I never connected the two before, because honestly, Metropolis, I picked that I wouldn't call that, like if I had to make an argument for my number one movie that connects to all my other principles, it wouldn't be Rintaro's Metropolis. Like it would probably be Women Under the Influence or something, or maybe, I don't know, Uncut Gems, but yeah, probably Women Under the Influence. But the thing is that there's something in that movie that I can't explain, that is just intangible, and it gives me like full body chills when I watch it, and it's just like, I just get sucked into this world and all that stuff, and I feel like the feeling that movie strikes about this kind of spirituality behind it, and like this connection between old swing music and anime aesthetics and Fritz Lang and like Osamu Tezuka, you know, Astro Boy and stuff, like the whole history of anime, like and all these things. It just feels like this kind of mythic object that just feels like there's that shot of the Robo Girl looking up while the cover of St. James Infirmary plays, and when I see that, I'm just like, oh my god. And then obviously the I Can't Stop Loving You needle drop, which is like fucking like, oh my god. But and specifically about the ending, I think that is very in tune with the rest of the film, where I think about Megalopolis, which came out recently. Again, tons of Metropolis vibes in that, more in particular to Fritz Lang thing. I feel like they both, Rintaro's Metropolis and I guess he calls it Osamu Tezuka's Metropolis, but Rintaro directed it anyway. And Megalopolis kind of spring from that same well of Fritz Lang's Metropolis, which is like this mythic film. And in Megalopolis, it's this kind of incoherent, very old man perspectives on optimism, creativity will rise above all, and all that stuff. And I just kind of see the people who are inspired by Fritz Lang's Metropolis, and so then Osamu Tezuka, Rintaro, and all that stuff, kind of drawing from that same well of just like, we can get better, you know, like, and it's that these systems, these people, they're fucked up. But I think a core part of Fritz Lang's Metropolis is the heart in the hands, the handshake thing, and it's about showing that like this big dystopian dictator is actually this fucked up dude with just these who's just trying to resurrect his wife and stuff, very similar to Gendo and Evangelion. Just for me, I'm just like, yeah, like shit can get better. Yeah, I don't know how to describe it. It's just something in that movie really resonates with me in ways I can't describe, and I can't defend it. Like, I can't defend it because I think people marginalized by these systems, people who don't have the privilege I do of being able to work with these systems, would see these movies. I see it in the Megalopolis response and be like, this is a crock of shit. Like, this is not how things get better, and it's probably not. But through the craft of what these movies articulate and stuff, they inspire me. They make me want to create things, all that stuff. And I'm not gonna interrogate that too much, because I think anything that inspires me to create more is gonna be good. And I'm trying to go from a broad variety of sources in what I'm inspired by. So I try, but Metropolis is just a weak spot for me.
Fair enough. In terms of, continuing on to what's on your favorites list,
Mm-hmm.
Funny Pages to me seems like it would make a lot of sense. Kind of this artsy guy, and he idolizes someone he shouldn't be idolizing. This,
Mm-hmm.
and it's almost like this obsession we have with art and the artist that created it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of that, what's it called? As people, I think the both of us can both say that we do enjoy making art, we do enjoy making things.
Mm-hmm.
Do you often find yourself kind of putting the artist that you love on a pedestal to the degree that you shouldn't be, and in a way you're afraid of knowing those people simply because you don't want to be disappointed by the image you've built in your head of them?
Yeah, well, that's interesting, because like I've never really related to the thing of never meet your idols, because whenever I have, I've learned something. It's like with me, I mean, I was hyper obsessed with Vincent Gallo, like an insane degree. I saw Buffalo 66. I thought that was the first movie to really get me, which is a troubling thought anyway. But and I just started poring over every single thing he'd ever done. I was like the Vincent Gallo guy on the internet. People would email me for his lost shorts and stuff. And then in 2022, I got the chance to go to New York, catch the last apparently public screening he's done since, and meet him during after the Q&A, get him to sign some stuff. I asked him this question about Brown Bunny and all that, and it was like a positive experience. And it wasn't even then, he was just really nice. He was surprisingly upbeat that whole Q&A, because when Seagal's at his worst is when he's in his boomer, reductive, racist, pro-life bullshit, which is just out to lunch. But it was a positive experience, and I felt like connected, but it didn't mean as much as the time I'd spent with his work, with his words, because that was the time I got to really inspire introspection. Meeting him, I just had to say thank you. That was it. That wasn't anything, And I learned a lot from the Q&A and stuff, but to me it was I think it was very similar to the Funny Pages thing. And I've had this a lot with smaller scale people too, where I'm like, you made a movie, you made a whatever, you made music, all that stuff, you must have all your shit together. And then I talk to them what the fuck are you talking about? They're out to lunch on shit. And I think that's a core thing. And to me, the time I saw Funny Pages was right in my last year of engineering studies, and that line that, I forget his name right now, the Image Comics guy in it, who Wallace, I believe. Yeah, Wallace, yeah, who is the the best portrait of a certain type of like neuroses and like a certain type of social incompatibility I've ever seen. Like I've met 1,000 engineering students like that guy, exactly. But he has that line at the end, it's "you're obsessed with my failure," which is crazy because obviously to Daniel Zolgaji's character, the main guy, that he's like, he made it, you know, he did it. But yet, does Wallace really feel the things he makes? Does he really put himself into his art? And it's obviously not. Like the whole point of it is that he's a technique-driven guy. He does it to get a paycheck. He probably likes the idea of being a comic book artist, but he doesn't have the spark that it requires to really put yourself out in your art, which is what maybe it's not even something you're born with. Maybe it's part of upbringing or whatever. Like that notion of you're obsessed with my failure made me think of the times that I've been on research terms doing weird stuff. I worked at a particle accelerator facility and stuff like that. And every time I talk to other engineers about it, they'd be like, "What? You worked there? Like that's crazy. That's like, you must be so smart." And it always hurt to hear that because I'm like, I'm just fucking playing the game, you know? Like I don't really feel the spark to, you know, read a fucking paper on Helmholtz resonance while I'm on my own, you know. I'm gonna go watch a fucking movie. And so to me, I thought of that like that line a lot because I'm like, you're obsessed with my failure. You think it's so cool that other people that they're just figuring shit out too. So yeah, I'm just trying. Like I think Daniel Zolgaji used to be. I'm trying to be nicer to Miles, the friend who's like, "Oh, what about Soul?" And it's like, if he was just nicer to his friend who's just making these goofy ass comics, he'd be a much better person. So I think that's one of the big takeaways from Funny Pages for me.
If we were to flip the pages and hypothetically in the future people were to come up to you and they were to kind of idolize you, you were to figure out that you were their idol, how would you think that would affect you? Because for a long time you've been on the side of the consumer. You've been someone who, when you consume media, you kind of, not necessarily fall in love, but you really do find yourself obsessed with this person who made the art that you love, that connects to you so deeply. Once you hit that point that, you know, maybe in the future someone comes up to you and says, the art you made has affected me deeply, how do you think you would internalize that? Do you think that your thinking would change? Do you think that, you know, outside of your own conscious thoughts, you would start to become more, not necessarily egotistic, but you try to become the person that they want you to become? Or do you feel like you could still hold yourself to your own individuality and still be like, okay, even if, you know, they idolize the parts of me that I don't think are the best, I will still continue with what I think is the best, kind of differentiating what you think people like about you and what you like about yourself? Yeah,
100%. I think that's a great question, and I think for me, the biggest virtue in that regard is that I'm stubborn. I have very passionate ideas about what I make, what I put into the world. So I don't think that people idolizing that way would do anything other than annoy me or make me happy in the moment, you know? And I mean, I probably think about it a lot, but I mean, it's not something that's gonna affect how I drive because I can't make something unless I really believe it, usually. And so that's not really a concern for me, but it is concerning if I've made, especially my early works, or like the stuff on my Ethel Gum channel, or the Baca no Pico video I made and stuff. These are things that can be misinterpreted, and people could latch on to the wrong aspects that are destructive. And that's why I kind of tried to, I mean, both because it's just where I moved as a person and all that stuff, but I want to try and minimize those misunderstandings. I'm not going to censor my stuff and make it any less, you know, at what it is, just because of that. But I'm trying to, like, you know, make my new stuff, like the Pump of the Cinephile video I made and stuff like that. It's like, these are just videos that are reflecting the kind of happier place I'm in now that I don't have to fucking worry about midterms and shit. So I want to just be there for them. And so like the people who idolize me, it's like makes me think of like, I'm trying to think of artists that have made a turn. I even Kendrick Lamar, who I like idolize. I thought Damn was this huge fucking like monolithic record. Of course, Pimp a Butterfly, Good Kid, Mad City, which is like the first hip hop album I ever really got into. And then when he released Mr. Morales, I just like was so angry about it. I just hated it because I thought he was saying all these things that I didn't want to hear, and it just seemed so preachy and stuff. I thought songs like Auntie Diaries was like not to where I was at the time. I was just so mad at it. And then just recently, mainly with like the all the beef tracks bringing me back to Mr. Morales, I'm like, this is the album I needed to hear. Like this is the shit that I'm way more at now, and I'm so glad that album's there for me now, that I can, like, I don't know if it led me to that place, because I don't think I was ready to hear it, but I'm glad I reached the place where I can now still be in tune with this artist I super admired, because they matured in a way that I wasn't ready for yet. And so I'm trying to be that for my minuscule following. I don't know, I think that's like what a good person and a good artist would do, which is to make things that are more in tune with where they're at the time. And I feel like I've become a more constructive, more listening person. Like I think even the difference between Prostrate Constantly in Review and the Aberdeen Eat Show, which, you know, like my show at the Aviary last year and on this year, shows a lot of growth, because I mainly just talked about jacking off last year, and there is good elements and stuff in there, but I'm still trying to navigate how to reconcile my very kind of introverted, introspective, compulsive, addictive past with meeting people that are creative and finding ways to channel creative energy with others that was much more constructive. And I think the kind of transition between those two showcases shows that. So if someone idolized me, I would hope that they could follow me in that way and wouldn't just think, oh, I lost the narrative or whatever, I stopped being real, because I'm being just as honest as I was back then. I've just become healthier.
To wrap this kind of segment up,
sure.
Let's connect what's called our talks about anime, about you know, parasocial relations, about kind of all that kind of stuff. And you're a big AMV creator, as I've been told. What do you think? Let's direct this towards the people watching. What do you think you would call anime fans, film fans? What do you think they need to hear? The typical fan, what do you think they need to hear is something, because you're talking about Mr. Morale, and that was an album that you needed to hear, but at the time you weren't ready to hear. What do you think is something that kind of what's called fan base, you know, Evangelion talks about otaku fans, that's a big subplot there. What do you think those people kind of need to hear to be able to kind of not only explore themselves, but to break out of a mold that I think a lot of people who become obsessed with art kind of fall into, in this, like, retracting yourself from the rest of the world because you believe they won't understand you, or that you believe that they hate you or something like that?
I mean, everyone's different, but to me, what helped me learn things, gain some different perspectives, is just to be open and not think that you know all the answers about the art you engage with, about the people around you. And I think even with something like VTuber ASMR, which was a big focus on my last show, I kind of got addicted to it. I would use it as this way to kind of dissociate from things, but I found ways to turn it so that it could help me study, it could help me make things, it could help me do these things that could end up helping me connect with other people. And I realized that ASMR is a creative thing that people work and make. And so someone like Shirokane Noel, Cerise Fauna, these are people that really care, or Patra Suo too, these are people who really care about the craft of making ASMR and do these creative things. And through noticing these creative choices these people made and feeling inspired by the fact that they care so much about something that is ridiculous. VTuber ASMR is a fucking ridiculous thing. I felt inspired, and so instead of turning it into this thing that was consumptive, into just, I like the sounds, I'm just gonna dissociate from the world, I turned it into paying attention, stop, look, listen, learn, and learn something about creativity and the world. And that's where my Fergura ASMR AMV came from. So to take that little microcosm, pay attention to things. There are people just like you making creative choices behind the things you engage with, and you don't just have to take it as what it can do for you. You can learn about what you can do to be like those people and create things to be yourself in your work, like the people do in all forms of craft. And yeah, so pay attention, and people are creative and doing cool shit.
I think the internet is a complicated thing. especially in how it influenced me. But I think to kind of trace it back, I grew up watching a lot of TV. I would just incessantly watch Sweet Life of Zack and Cody, Ruby Gloom, SpongeBob, all that stuff. And I think in particular, like the live action stuff is really interesting because I did start to, because I was a pretty sheltered kid. When like I started to talk to other people, I would base what I would say and how I thought they would react off sitcoms and stuff, which is a really interesting, weird way to develop. And I think that probably inseparably changed some of my brain chemistry. But I think the internet was a much healthier relationship later on because at least it was reciprocal. I could do things and the things would respond, and I actually felt like I was having some sort of dialogue, which with TV you can't. And being a kid with esoteric interests, just like hyper obsessed with movies and stuff, it was much healthier that I could interact with people about them, and find people with common interests. But that's an uphill battle in itself. And so then I think a defining factor in me growing up, which had good and bad aspects, was I ended up going on 4chan a lot when I was young, which rocked me because I was a sheltered kid. If you look at my early like Rotten Tomatoes reviews when I like linked my Facebook to it, they're all just like the most parroting what people said, like obvious, like looking for approval sort of things, which I think is just kind of like how a lot of film criticism dialogue engenders that thought. And then when I tried to do that on like Slash TV on 4chan, I would just get bodied. Like people would just attack me, and it was good and bad because I stopped being like that. I started to actually I started to have the thought process to think for myself and stuff. But then I also just started to follow what they thought, which was generally very destructive, reactive, bad ideologies that I'm still trying to move away from and figure out my way through. So that's something that doesn't help you connect with other people. So I feel like it was like a good like push to get me to rock my own notion of myself and all that. But in the long run, it had repercussions. So I think then moving away from that, finding a site like Letterboxd, connecting with people, finding like really niche obsessions, like when I got hyper obsessed with Vincent Gallo, when I got hyper obsessed with Kanye West, when I got hyper obsessed with Kendrick Lamar, like finding people that shared those things and then just having a constant ability to connect with them about new developments. Like we found a new Vincent Gallo show. We can talk about that. We could talk about how we're going to find the next thing and all that stuff for like hours. And then that's like a good way to engender a friendship. And I met people from all around the world. I have friends in Chile, Brazil, Portugal, the UK, all that stuff. And these are real connections, because I feel like through the time that we spent talking about one artist, then the guy who I got super into Vincent Gallo with, we ended up watching all of John Cassavetes movies, and then that changed my life and all that stuff. And that's a great way to feel connected with people. But then at a certain point, like doing that enough, then I didn't really have people in the real world I could talk to that has their own consequences, like feeling connected to people around you, going to a concert together, going to just do shit, riff, like it has a different thing to it. So when I started volunteering at the Metro and volunteering with Animathon, those were things where I got these deeper connections with people that didn't necessarily share the same niche interests as me, but had a whole new perspective of human experience that I wasn't attuned to because I wasn't interacting that deeply with people that didn't share those same interests. So then that broadened my horizons even more. So I feel like it was all just a series of steps that the internet was a core part of, and that I was able to find and path through to use constructively. But I could see someone getting lost in any one of those steps. Like there are people still just stuck on the 4chan thought process and ideologies. There's people still stuck in just sharing things with their niche friend group and not being able to connect with people in real life and all that stuff. And so I'm just really lucky I found the way to navigate through all that. And I hope people can find their own ways through it that had similar circumstances to me, feeling like the Canadian alien watching TV that had no relation to their circumstances or experience. Well, yeah, like and their experience, because I think that's tied to it. Don't turn out like Matt Johnson in The Dirties. That's all I can say. So in terms of art as an intrinsic process and whether money influences that, I think I'm in a very lucky position. I have a 9-to-5 job. I have the disposable income to be able to rent out the Metro and show AMVs and stuff like that, and spend all this time making AMVs that are unmonetizable because of copyright law. So that's just lucky for me. And a lot of the things I'm drawing from is drawing from people that do this as a profession, like people who, not like Hiroshi Harada, who somehow, actually, I don't know how he gets the money, but he is able to do his own stuff totally by his own rules. A lot of the animation companies in Japan obviously have more lax labor laws and all these things compared to America, at least from what I've heard. I'm not an expert on that. And so these are people getting paid to make these artworks that resonate so deeply with me, and yet am I able to say that that has less value than mine because they got paid for it, because they're making things in a marketplace that has value, that because of there's elements in Evangelion that are obviously tied to genre and convention because of marketability? I can't say that that's any less valuable than mine, because it's like, that's the circumstance. You can only make something on that scale. I could never make something on an Evangelion scale with my resources and stuff. But I can try to do my own thing of articulating my own circumstances using what I have. So it's a fine line, because when you make art only for money, when you make art only to establish a career for yourself, then you become Drake. Then you become the guy who is lost in his identity, ends up colonizing Atlanta and stuff like Kendrick talks about. That's when you become the guy who's lost and is lonely and is not engendering a real feeling of connection and community among the whatever he inspires in his art. And that's when you can become Kendrick Lamar. Kendrick Lamar makes things that are very they make money, but they are also things separately tied to his circumstance, his background, the community he engenders, the artists he brings out are being honest and truthful about their circumstance. So I think that you have to be driven by something that isn't just monetary gain and or the notion of respect or status, because those things will not lead you to be as compulsive, to be as honest, to be as probing, and ultimately your work will suffer much more. So I think the way that it's unfortunate, the way that our economic systems are structured, that to make a 9-to-5 making art sucks usually and does not engender the greatest creative environment for real maverick artists. And you have to be someone like a John Cassavetes or a Hiroshi Arata to really like rock shit, to make truly radical art. But if you can find your way around it, I think that's just as valuable. There's Jane Schoenbrums up there. There's fucking, I don't know, the Owen Klein, Josh and Benny Safdie, all these great, Charles Burnett. Like there are people out there. I guess Charles Burnett's kind of an exception, but they're making things that are meaningful, exist in an economic context, and yet are able to balance the concessions that you need in order to make something marketable, but yet making something that's true and honest. And that's all you can do. That's the intrinsic process. Yeah, I think anime is a complex thing, like any medium, which it basically how I started every one of these questions. But it's that obviously animation has been coded to be for children since its kind of inception, which is a bummer, because you have people like Vince Collins or Hiroshi Arata, or like a number of maverick independent animators, Marcel Yankovic, who are creating things for adults that is just as in tune with film theory as the great experimental filmmakers that are able to use the potentials of animation to push the medium forward, deliver complex philosophical, emotional ideas, all these things that we don't tend to associate with animation, because I think once anything has more has a significant appeal for kids, we know we can get money from that, and there's a complex history of all that. But in terms of anime particularly, I think there's a lot of connotations to anime that make it like it is, that tie a lot to Japanese customs, ideals, societal concerns, and all that stuff. And I think the way that translates in the West for a certain archetype of person is weird and specific. For me, I know in particular, my love of anime came about circumstantially. I had an aunt that was super into anime and would burn me anime DVDs that I would watch with my mom, and so I'd watch like Claymore and Full Metal Alchemist and all these different things. And then I always thought it was interesting. I was never crazy about it. And then one time I was on the Internet Movie Firearms database, and I saw a screenshot of Monster Musume that unlocked something in me, and I became obsessed with that show. And then I became obsessed with the more young adult, ecchi, perverted side of anime that has kind of carried through a lot of my stuff. But I had friends to watch it with. I had friends who were interested in anime online, and it's much easier to throw on a 20-minute episode of anime than to throw on a movie or whatever. And so I found that I could draw out a circumstance where it was easy to watch these things with people, and so that's why I got into it. And I feel like it's something David Byrne points out in his How Music Works book that's incredible, that the history of music is more tied to circumstance and practicality and pragmatism than actual conscious artistic evolution. And I think that happens a lot with art engagement, where, you know, if you have a lot of friends that listen to hip hop, you're going to listen to more hip hop. Or if you find, you know, if you study a lot, you're going to listen to a lot more like electronic or lo-fi beats or whatever. And so it's like these things in your life, or if you can find a context for an art form, you're going to be more willing to engage with it. So if you can find that with your friends with anime, then there's going to be cool stuff you can find, and it's going to vary depending on your friend group. Like if your friends like just dialogue comedy and the girls doing dumb things, and watch like Lucky Star or Azumanga Daioh or whatever. And if you're into more artsy stuff, then you're going to watch Evangelion or Fooly Cooly or His and Her Circumstances. Or if you're into action stuff, you're going to watch like Gurren Lagann, Kill la Kill, all these things. So like there's a whole spectrum of things based on circumstance that you can engage with in anime that's just like any medium. And if you can find the context, I would say it's a fairly rewarding journey, and the community you can find as a result of that is very gratifying. Like going to Animathon, going through the vendors hall, the artist alley, and connecting with people over these niche things feels good. It feels really good. And if you like, you know, if you like want to see AMVs for it, you can come to the AMV room in the AMV context. If you want to see a panel about it, there'll be someone doing a panel. You can meet a lot of friends, and it's a really great communal environment. So that's something specific to anime that is powerful and cool. And so there's an appeal of anime to someone who doesn't get it. But if you can't find a circumstance to watch it, if you don't have the group of friends that would resonate with that sort of thing, then it's not for you, and that's fine too. And you can find something else that I'm sure will be just as communal that is great. You can go to Folk Fest, you can go to like there's so many cool things. I just think when you can connect a personal interest beyond just consumption towards connection, community, creative conscience in terms of like recognizing what is creative about a certain medium, be it like anime, folk music, ASMR. These are all things that have the potential to go beyond consumption if you take the time and consciousness. And I think everyone has that somewhere, with something about science, art, history, politics, anime. You can find that thing because that's how you become a more full person. And for me, that's anime and AMVs.